Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Planning and Works Committee meeting on August the 11th, 2022. This meeting is for the Regional Official Plan Amendment. I will now call on the committee clerk to perform the roll call.
Regional Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Vrbanovic.
Present.
Councillor Jaworski.
Here.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Jowett.
Present.
Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor McGarry.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Strickland.
Here.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Galloway.
Present.
And we have regrets from Councillors Lorenz, Kiefer, and Erb.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather virtually today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Councillor Vrbanovic.
Thank you. I will be declaring a conflict of interest pertaining to the issue of the Ottawa Street corridor, as I have family that owns property in the proximity of the corridor, and in particular, it deals with, so I would ask that the first recommendation that deals with that corridor be dealt with separately.
Okay, we can do that. Any others? Seeing none. So today's meeting is the committee meeting, the Planning and Works Committee opportunity to deal with the ROP amendment. There'll be some kind of a recommendation at the end of this meeting, and it would typically go forward to the special council meeting that is scheduled for next week. So today we'll have a staff presentation, which is intended to be about 20 to 25 minutes long. We have currently 9 delegations. And after the presentation, we will hear those delegations. We will ask the viewing audience if there is anyone else that wishes to delegate, that they can do so by contacting the clerk and getting the link to the meeting in order to delegate. And we'll go over that again a little bit later. Councillor Vrbanovic.
Thanks, Chair Galloway. Just a point of clarification now that we're in the open meeting. My understanding is that today we're hearing delegations, and the intent is that at council next week that won't be the case. There is numerous pieces of correspondence that have come in the last couple of hours. I'm sure council hasn't been able to fully consider them, nor has staff, I would imagine. And there will likely be need for response to some of the issues and concerns that are being raised in the correspondence, and perhaps people may want to delegate. I'm wondering what the plan and intention is for that for next week.
Plan right now is that we would allow for people to submit any written delegations, but we're not going to have any personal delegations at the council meeting. Now that's pending what the decision of today's meeting is. If there are decisions today that are different than what has been anticipated, or a change is being made, then there may be a need for people to have an opportunity to personally respond to those. But as it stands right now, the intent is not to have personal delegations there, but written submissions, of course, are certainly acceptable.
So will staff be following up on the number of pieces of correspondence that we have received today and what we'll hear from delegations?
Yeah.
If required, and will that be shared both with the delegation and council well ahead of the meeting on the 18th?
As always, staff will respond to the submissions, and again, if anybody wants to submit a written delegation next week, they are certainly encouraged to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Regier.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. Yes, this meeting is the second last meeting in an extended process we've been engaged in for the last 2.5 years with the community as a whole and with all of our stakeholders and with council. We have need to carry through a discussion on a variety of matters today that will update the amendment for council that's being brought for you today. Next slide, please. So our agenda today is to review the objectives of the plan, to discuss the community conversations that we've been engaged in, and the policy refinements that have been resulting from those conversations, and to discuss next steps in the process of adopting a regional plan amendment of this scope. Next slide, please. So what is being presented today? Council has already presented with the bulk of the amendment that is before you today. Back in June, on June 22nd of this year, we presented the comprehensive package. We then went into a 6-week period of public conversation and engagement. We've met with all of the councils extensively to get additional municipal feedback from our area municipal colleagues and councils. And today what we're presenting is really the refinement, and it's a relatively small portion of the ROP amendment that you were presented with on June 22nd, or June 24th rather, that will be discussed today. The document is fundamentally the same as was presented on June 24th with some minor changes. And each of these changes have been vetted with the area municipalities. Next slide, please. Now, we did have a number of specific questions that councillors asked us to address in the period of time that intervened between June 24th and today. A significant question came in from particularly the City of Kitchener and Councillor Davey regarding how G7 average housing units per capita in the region and the relative performance of our housing inventory compared to G7 comparators. The key message from us on this issue are that the countries that comprise the G7 have very different demographics from the Waterloo region as a whole, and from Canada. Canada is among the youngest populations in the G7. Waterloo region is even younger in age structure. We know that younger age structured communities have greater persons per housing unit, simply because there are more children in family units. Older populations have the need for, have typically got fewer people per housing unit, and as a result, they have more houses per capita. So we also have the difference of a very significant student population, which typically lives in very high density housing assemblies. So per unit, students would have higher densities per unit, and that means that the housing need for the Waterloo region is quite different from the G7 countries, particularly older countries like Japan and France and Italy and so on. There was a question with regard to Airbnb and its impact on the housing market. We don't have a lot of information on Airbnb. There has been some analysis over the last few years, but it's difficult to know exactly how much short-term rental there is in housing units in Airbnb rentals in the housing units in the region. We have about 64,500 renter-occupied structure homes. We have about 138,000 owner-occupied homes. The rental stock, within the rental stock, about 15% of the rentals are low density housing, 20% are medium density, and the remaining 65% are in high density units. There has been some study, particularly by a Professor Locksmith at McGill, who suggests that we just simply need to do more work to find out what the impact is on the housing market. However, we suggest here that the impact of Airbnb on the local housing market is likely to be more significant in rural economies like, for example, Prince Edward County, and to some extent in cities like Toronto than it would be in the region of Waterloo. The other issue that we have been asked by Councillor Strickland was how much of the land that we brought into the regional urban area since the last ROP has been developed. And I can answer that by saying we brought in about 425 hectares of lands into the urban area. None are developed. Certain parcels are under consideration in the development application process right now, and others have secondary planning work and services are being extended to them. So we would see some pretty significant development of those parcels in the next few years. Next slide, please. We just wanted to summarize briefly the engagement that we've had. In this process, we've had over 300 individual meetings with groups, stakeholders, area municipalities, to explore options and to discuss our policy framework and land needs assessment. We've had 465,000 website visits on Engage WR. Our Engage platform has been well used. It's got all of the information that's been made available through the process for the public. We've done 13 surveys with 800 some responses and 8 public events with over 500 attendees, or nearly 500 attendees. We've done multiple presentations, of course, to council. There's been considerable coverage in both social media and traditional media. Next slide. So the key message here is that the world is changing and the future of the region will be different. We see a really bright and thriving future for the Waterloo region. Next slide, please. But it is our responsibility to create an equitable and thriving and sustainable community in the context of all of the changes that are underway globally and across the country and across Ontario. Next slide, please. How will the future be different and why? Well, we see a very significant energy transition. Our councils have all challenged us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by the year 2050. And this plan is one of the key tools in order that will help us achieve that vision. The energy system is going to be very different, and communities that are efficient and thriving places that are built to accommodate this new energy model will thrive in the future. The weather is becoming warmer, wetter, and wilder. We're seeing increasing frequency of climate-related events and supply chain issues. Challenges in our agriculture and agri-food systems are already evident from the changing climate. We see continuing economic changes. Of course, the last year, 2 years, 3 years have been extremely dynamic, and we expect to see ongoing economic change that our economy is going to need to be positioned to respond to. Our community is having serious discussions about equity and housing in particular, and there is an urgency for us to work towards a more equitable community. We will be welcoming more people. Our region is growing. It's an attractive place to live and work and play. And as a result, we need to plan for the growth that we are going to be experiencing. And of course, the regional's official plan is a key tool to helping make sure that we have the housing and the employment land that will help us thrive in that future. We feel that we're in a strong position to build the housing that we need and to meet this future head on. And I want to make sure that we all understand the numbers that show us the path forward. So we're going to take you through some of the really important numbers. Next slide, please. So we are planning to accommodate 306,000 people into the region of Waterloo. All area municipalities have been allocated population growth through a mix of designated greenfield area and intensification, and we'll go through that in a bit. Next slide, please. We are going to be accepting or planning for 168,000 new jobs. All area municipalities have been allocated job growth through a mix of DGA intensification, and we'll also go through that in a bit. I would say that I'll cover this in another slide coming up, but the types of jobs that we will be accommodating vary from those that are in large office to community area employment, retail, and so on, to traditional industrial employment and rural employment. Next slide, please. So we'll accommodate this growth with more housing. We're planning for 21,000 housing units over the planning period, taking our total from 223,000 to 344,000 units. The region has experienced very significant levels of development over the last 3 years. The last 3 years, 2019, 2020, 2021, have been record years in terms of building permits and development. We've all seen the activity across the region. But this plan anticipates even increasing the annual development activity by an additional 25% beyond what we're experiencing between now and 2051. Next slide, please. It's important to understand that we've already started to build the inventory of housing that we need for the future. Right now, the region has, across all area municipalities, 35,000 housing units that are in draft plans of subdivision pending or approved registered plans of subdivision. In total, this could accommodate 93,000 people, which is approximately a third of the growth that we're expecting. This number does not include intensification projects like you see taking place right across the region. There are active cranes, active high-rise constructions projects, active mid-rise construction projects right across the region, as well as plans of condominium that are contemplated in greenfield areas. So we have a significant amount of intensification underway in both medium density and high density projects. And our cities and even the townships are working to process an unprecedented number of development projects that take advantage of underutilized properties in our communities, in our urban centers, as well as new developments in our greenfield areas. For example, just on Monday, the city of Kitchener approved a very significant subdivision, 96-hectare development with 3,500 residential units, further supporting the fact that there is a considerable amount of land ready and available to build new housing in the region of Waterloo. So of those 35, next slide, please. Of those 35,000 units, approximately 1/3 are low rise, 1/3 are medium rise, and 1/3 are high rise. These are entirely being driven by the market. So we know that the market, the housing market, that is a reflection of the supply and demand, is changing. Over the last 20, 30 years, we've seen a steady shift in the type of housing that people are asking to buy, from low density to higher density. We're still building a lot of low density housing, but the market is telling us that there's a need for more high density housing, and that's what's been built at the present time. Next slide, please. With regard to employment, we already have space for 167,000 people in jobs now, and approximately 2,700 hectares of land across the region. So this is the greenfield inventory of the Waterloo region. It's a very significant inventory, and we're going to be adding a bit more, particularly in areas in the municipalities that don't have sufficient greenfield land to accommodate growth, where we're adding about 150 hectares to complete communities in a variety of areas. Next slide, please. So this is where our greenfield area is located, our current vacant greenfield area. The city of Kitchener has approximately 1,150 hectares of vacant greenfield area. About half of that has been planned, and a good chunk of that planned greenfield area is reflected in the 35,000 housing units that are currently being planned for. Cambridge has the next largest inventory of vacant greenfield land at 664 hectares, and you can see the rest of the municipalities in sequence. And the municipality, the area municipality, the township with the least amount of greenfield land is Wellesley with 17 hectares. Next slide, please. I should make the point on the previous slide, however, that greenfield area is the community area land is not simply for housing. It needs to be able to accommodate all of the institutional and commercial land uses which support a complete community. Education infrastructure, schools, commercial infrastructure, like land uses like grocery shopping, professional services, community services, community infrastructure like parks and open space and playgrounds and that sort of thing. So, I want everybody to understand that when we talk about community area land, we're not simply talking about subdivisions with houses on them or with developments on them. It encompasses the entire inventory of the types of land uses that we take advantage of every day. Next slide, please. So with regard to employment lands, we already have space for approximately 40,000 jobs on 1,072 hectares of vacant employment land. So that's our starting point for employment land. Our land needs assessment has identified the need for more, considerably more. And so we're planning to add an additional 456 hectares of land, and that will accommodate at the current industrial densities, about 13,000 new jobs. Next slide, please. And this is where that employment area land is located. Now here we're talking about land that is suitable for traditional industrial uses, warehousing and logistics and supply chain activities, that sort of thing. So manufacturing is a big chunk of this. And the bulk of our vacant employment land area is located in Cambridge. There's some in Waterloo and a bit in Kitchener, and Woolwich has got some, but the bulk of it is located in Cambridge right now. And I just want to remind people that when we think about employment, the 168,000 jobs that we have to plan for, those will be contemplated in 4 categories: traditional industrial employment, like we're talking about here; major office, which will tend to be located in transit supportive locations near the center of our central transit corridor; and population-related employment, such as retail and professional services, accounting, legal service, and so on; and rural employment, which is the type of employment that we see, distributed across our townships. Next slide, please. In addition to this, we can accommodate the majority of our new residents through intensification while strengthening our neighborhoods for everyone. This plan envisions a new approach to community building where the priority is on the development of 15-minute neighborhoods, where the needs of all residents and of all ages and abilities can be met within a 15-minute walk, cycle, or roll, such as using a mobility device. And all other needs can be met through convenient and frequent access to transit. We can't take for granted that communities will be built in order to support this type of convenience. And the concept applies to both cities and townships, where we know that to support our population, to support our community, and particularly to support people with lower incomes, we need to make ready access to services and housing and transit from the get-go, from the start of the community building process. We simply must do a better job of building complete communities that are transit supportive from the outset. It's very difficult and expensive to provide transit services to low-density communities that are not designed for it. And we've had a tremendously positive response to the concept of the 15-minute neighborhood that we've introduced through this process. We'll work with the area municipalities and our community and our industry stakeholders to visualize this idea for the future. Next slide, please. So our simple message here is that to thrive in the future, there needs to be diversity in housing. Right now, our housing stock is dominated by low-density housing. It's a very expensive form of housing and not affordable for many people living in the Waterloo region. We need to provide, and we are providing, a much more diverse array of housing options for people. Next slide, please. We're preparing for a housing mix that will meet more people's need by providing greater choice through more diverse housing options. The housing mix that we're envisioning will be part of the solution when we talk about things like housing affordability, shifting the mix into a missing middle, which we're able to build out of wood frame and fit into existing neighborhoods, creating vibrancy. And all of this can happen organically within neighborhoods, but also on our transit serviced arterials, if we provide the policy tools which are contemplated in this regional official plan and reflected in the future in the area municipal official plans. Housing, the housing that we're contemplating building here needs to accommodate our existing and future workforce, and it needs to accommodate the components of the workforce that are highly paid, as well as those that are less well paid. So we need to think holistically about building a housing inventory that meets the needs of our entire community. And we need to think about our housing needs at different stages of life. We need to be able to build housing that's suitable for seniors, as well as young families and empty nesters and so on. There is uncertainty that is inherent when we think about the future, but we think that we've built a lot of flexibility here to build the housing mix that our community needs in the future. Next slide, please. So we know that the market is changing. We know that there is and will be a lot of low-density housing in the future. Our housing inventory will include a lot of single-detached and semi-detached housing moving forward. We know that we have a significant amount of vacant land already in the inventory, the urban area, and that there will be more choice for existing and future residents to meet their diverse needs. So based on that, we're proposing an amendment that we think will secure our housing future. But housing is only one part of the RUP. So now we're going to walk you through the full community conversation that we've been having about how to create an equitable and thriving and sustainable future. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides will be we'll cover the conversation, some of the conversations that we've been having over the last 3 years with our area municipal colleagues and our stakeholders and public, particularly in relation to some of the really solid questions that have been asked about our planning assumptions. We've really approached this exercise as a collaboration in order to achieve the vision of becoming an equitable and thriving and sustainable community. So let's address our chief criticisms first. Next slide, please. So we've had a number of key questions posed to us. We've had criticisms that our land needs assessment methodology is not robust. We've had criticisms that our housing supply is not adequate, and that the housing mix for the future workforce hasn't been contemplated. And so I just want to go through these briefly, one at a time. Next slide, please. So with regard to the land needs methodology, we've carefully reviewed all of the inquiries, analyses that have been provided by various consultants and developers over the last little while. We've reviewed any potential errors that were identified in that. We really appreciate the careful consideration that's been given to this challenge. We've looked at this on a parcel by parcel basis. We've looked at the numbers in our models. We've carefully considered all of the questions that have been put to us with regard to the methodology. And we've made adjustments as necessary. And I'd like to just thank everybody who's contributed input into that process. Adjustments that have been requested that would have put us out of conformity with our land needs assessment methodology have not been made. So I just want to be clear that the land needs assessment methodology that you have before you today is an intact piece of work. It holds together and needs to be thought about holistically as a package that is supported by the policy amendment that follows as well. With regard to alternative land needs assessments, I will say that we've made requests for all of the land needs assessment calculations that have supported alternative land allocations, but we haven't received them. The alternative land needs estimates range widely. So, and without the detailed calculations, the math that underpins those estimates, it's a challenge for us to respond to requests that are not fully supported by the technical analysis. With regard to the adherence to provincial methodology, our long-term population analysis, our technical briefs that back up all of the numbers that we've brought forward are consistent with provincial methodology. We've had an ongoing conversation with the province about that methodology, and we feel comfortable that there's that the analysis and the methodology is strong, and we've had minimal amount of analysis to back up counterclaims to our analysis. The LNA, land allocations and policy framework, as I mentioned, were developed as a whole, fully integrated package, and we believe they need to be considered as such. Next slide, please. So with regard to housing supply, choice in housing form will be key to our future. Attracting and retaining the diverse needs of a variety of our employers and or the labor force that our employers need, and the workforce that our economy needs is a priority, as identified in the proposed amendment before you. This plan will deliver 21,000 new singles and semis in the planning period, bringing us to a total of 155,000 low-density housing units by 2051. And that will still be just under 50% of the total housing inventory for the region of Waterloo. So even though we're making a transition here, our housing inventory will remain pretty low density through the planning process. This transition is not going to eliminate low density housing. And I think this is a really important point that needs to be considered here. We need more missing middle housing. I think there's a consensus in this community that we need more housing that's in mid-rise form, that has large enough apartments for family units and for families and for couples and so on. Our policy amendment here proposes to address that and introduces policies to advance this in partnership with our area municipalities and with our industry partners. I'm really delighted personally to see that already we are getting a significant amount of missing middle housing being developed, particularly along our arterials. You know, I see proposals for new medium density projects ongoing in the media. And the solution to building our housing, a diverse housing stock that our community needs, is collective effort. The ROP is one tool. It's a long-term planning tool. It will not resolve perceived short-term deficits. The supply we are projecting aligns with our provincial method, with the provincial methodology. The forecasted housing that we're projecting allows the development community to build 25% more housing on an annual basis than they are currently doing. Our land supply is clearly not a barrier to ongoing housing development at a rate that our community needs. The region will work, and I just want to make this point really clear, the region will work collaboratively with our area municipal colleagues, through a working group whose goal will be to explore further options to accelerate the approval and construction of new homes. So we think this is a top priority. The land is available right now to build the housing that we need, and we're certainly ready to be part of that community building project. Next slide, please. So, with regard to land to support the future economy, obviously, housing is important to our economic and our business stakeholders, but so is employment land. And we're allocating, as I mentioned earlier, a significant amount of employment land to this region. We think it's of a strategic nature. It's extremely important to our long-term, the strength of our economy over the long term. The protection of that employment land inventory is also important. So I want to mention that we'll be addressing this through the proposed amendment, and the amendment that's before you strongly positions the Waterloo region for continued economic prosperity by delivering the employment land inventory that we require for the future. There is a considerable amount of existing vacant land available for development of manufacturing, warehouse supply chain type activities, logistics, and so on, and for employment right across the economy through our community area and through our major transit station areas. Next slide. And with this, I'm going to hand it over to Danielle, who's going to walk us through the themes and the changes, the minor changes that we've made to the ROP amendment through this last few weeks.
All right. Thank you, Rod, and good afternoon, members of Regional Council. On the slide, you'll see the 8 theme areas that the feedback on the update to the Regional Official Plan have been categorized under. For your information, the staff report includes attachment D, which provides a summary of the feedback received using the categories which are shown on the screen. Next slide. We're now going to transition into some of the updates to the policies in the draft amendment compared to the version which was presented to Regional Council in June and released for review and comment. As Rod mentioned earlier in the presentation, the refinements are scoped, and the majority of the policies and mapping included in the updated amendment are the same as the previous version. Next slide. There has been significant engagement with area municipal staff on a daily basis since the release of the first draft of the amendment in June, as well as engagement through a variety of different methods with the public and stakeholders. Some of the updates to respond to the feedback through engagement since June are listed on the screen, and they include identification of the locations for community area urban expansions in the city of Cambridge and in the township of Wellesley, further refinement to mapping in the Southwest Kitchener policy area, the addition of language recognizing the role of children and youth in our community, a new policy regarding priority consideration for air within the township of North Dumfries, and refinements to missing middle housing policies. Next slide. The land needs assessment identified that the city of Cambridge required an additional 8 hectares of land to accommodate its forecasted community area growth to 2051. The June version of the proposed amendment did not identify specific locations for community area expansions in the city of Cambridge. Over the past few weeks, city and regional staff have worked together to identify the recommended location of community area expansions, identified as CA14, CA15, and CA16, as shown in purple on the screen and reflected on page 7 of attachment C. Next slide. This slide shows the location of urban expansions in the township of Wellesley. Policy 2C35 of the original draft amendment provided for the expansion of the village of Wellesley by an additional 17 hectares of land to accommodate the township's forecasted community area growth to 2051. The policy established a framework to determine the specific locations of expansion through future planning process to be led by the township of Wellesley and implemented through a further regional official plan amendment. In support of the township's preference to designate the required expansion areas in the regional official plan amendment now, rather than deferring it to a future planning process, areas CA11, CA12, and CA13 have been proposed designated as community area. These areas, as well as a corresponding rationalization of the countryside line, are shown on the screen and reflected on page 8 of attachment C. Next slide. So this slide shows refinements to the mapping in the Southwest Kitchener policy area. The June draft of the amendment showed the implementation of Regional Official Plan Policy 6B1 based on the most current available technical information submitted by landowners in that area and reviewed by the region's source water and hydrogeological staff. And the mapping reflected updates to the regional recharge area and the countryside line in this area. Based on additional technical information provided by a landowner and reviewed by regional staff, a further adjustment to the regional recharge area and countryside line is proposed, as reflected on map 1, regional structure of the proposed amendment. Next slide. In addition to the mapping updates, there are policy updates, some of which include new language to better consider the well-being and belonging of children and youth in community planning. The updated amendment includes new policy language in chapters 1 and 2 that would better consider the well-being and belonging of children and youth within community planning. There's also a new policy applicable to the Township of North Dumfries that would give priority consideration to expand the Village of Ayr to include certain lands if additional lands are required through the next municipal comprehensive review of the regional official plan. There are also proposed refinements to missing middle housing policies. The original draft amendment provided for the development of 2 types of missing middle to help increase housing choice in the region, including affordable housing. The first type referred to neighborhood missing middle and provided for a range of low-rise housing options that would be permitted on all residential lots within the urban area and township urban areas. The second type, referred to as mid-rise missing middle housing, provided for the development of medium-density housing options, such as low to mid-rise apartment buildings, typically up to 12 stories. This form of missing middle housing was proposed to be permitted on all residential lots within the regional intensification corridor or other local centers and local intensification corridors identified by area municipalities. This policy sought to align mid-rise missing middle housing with existing or planned higher order transit services. Based on the feedback, very detailed feedback received from area municipalities, staff are proposing to simplify the approach to missing middle housing, to remove mid-rise missing middle housing, and the second change would revise the term neighborhood missing middle to missing middle housing and refine the applicable policy and definition. We anticipate further conversations with area municipalities through the implementation of this policy, through area municipal official plan updates, and potentially the development of further guidance. Next slide. So I'll now walk you through the next steps. The updated proposed regional official plan amendment is before Planning and Works Committee today for consideration of adoption. The amendment focuses on updates to chapters 1 and 2 and section 3A of the regional official plan, as well as associated definitions, maps, and figures. There will be a special meeting of Regional Council next Thursday, August 18th, which will include a bylaw of adoption, which will provide the mechanics of the amendment to update the regional official plan. Following adoption of the plan, there will be a package prepared to submit to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for the Minister's review of the approval of the official plan. We will be undertaking the second part of the update to the regional official plan, commencing in the fall and continuing into 2023. Next slide. Thank you very much. That concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Rod and Danielle. We'll now go to the delegations, and I will proceed with the delegations as listed on the agenda. I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. Please leave your video and camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you are called upon to speak. Today's delegations will be allotted 5 minutes to speak. Groups of 2 or more will be allotted 10 minutes. Any delegations who registered after the deadline will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. We have one of those registered. These time allotments are in line with the pilot project that has been undertaken since 2021 and will continue to be followed this afternoon. If you're watching the webcast of this meeting and would like to address the committee at the end of the registered delegations, you can contact Regional Clerk at regionofwaterloo.ca. That's regionalclerk@regionofwaterloo.ca during the meeting to obtain the link. Delegations that do register during the meeting will be given 3 minutes to speak after the registered delegations. You can also submit any written comments that you may have to the same email address, regionalclerk@regionofwaterloo.ca. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting, interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on and off at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideals shared with us from our community members. So we do have 9 registered delegations, and we'll start with the first one, and that is Kevin Thomason. Councillor Foxton, you have a question?
A comment, Chair. I was very concerned at the last meeting and disappointed in myself for not speaking up. When an individual spoke and said that only certain people should have a right to discuss these things and that others should not. This is Canada and everybody has a voice. And I want to make that known that everyone has a voice. If we don't hear all the voices, we don't make good decisions. So I just wanted to make that known today, and I will palm my hand again if I find that someone does do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thomason. There's Kevin. Welcome, Kevin.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Honorable mayors, councillors, and guests. By now, you know that my name is Kevin Thomason and that I'm co-founder of Smart Growth Waterloo Region. For 3 years, so many events and activities about this regional official plan update have been leading up to this vote this afternoon. There have been so many community and council meetings, thousands of letters and emails, and countless hours put in by citizens across Waterloo Region, speaking up for the future that they want to see. We now have the bold and visionary plan with the climate solutions and sustainable, complete neighborhoods we are going to need. This plan addresses concerns about housing supply, housing choice, housing affordability, and the missing middle. It should provide more affordable homes in more locations and allow people to age in their own neighborhood and not have to leave because there isn't the housing they need or can afford. It has a focus on active transportation, public transportation, and even new concepts like Phase 3 of ION LRT. While progressive and even pioneering in some aspects, it continues the same smart growth trajectory and will service as well as our current innovative and successful regional official plan. It seems that aside from some of the development community and disappointed land speculators that also fought the previous regional official plan so vehemently, almost all of the feedback from recent open houses, the public, area municipalities, and even our local First Nations are extremely positive and supportive. We wouldn't have light rail transit, environmentally sensitive landscapes, the countryside line, and so many things we now take for granted if we'd listened to all the opponents. While it is unfortunate to see any farmland loss, the very small 150 hectares of expansion being permitted over the next 30 years is focused on helping our rural townships provide new housing forms and services to create more complete and sustainable communities. Additional greenfield urban sprawl is not needed. Our cities already have thousands of greenfield DGA homes that will be built in the coming years. Prematurely adding additional lands, as some are requesting now, that won't come on stream until the mid-2040s at the earliest, is going to do nothing to address affordability or other current issues. Regional staff, consultants, professional planners, and professors have concluded there is already adequate land supply until at least 2051. Even if they're all wrong, there is still the opportunity to address any issues many times in the years ahead in the mandatory 5-year ROP reviews. Having declared a climate emergency with a pending food crisis, there is no need to doom additional prime farmland to destruction. It just isn't in the best public interest. Market trends, our climate crisis, and what people can afford is clear, and we're heading in the direction of needing less land, not more. In conclusion, for decades, Waterloo Region has pioneered and become renowned for innovative planning that has been unique, bold, and progressive, but also very carefully planned, well considered, and strongly supported by our community. Please prove that we care about our future generations and will work towards more progressive, sustainable solutions. Please continue to lead our province with unique Made in Waterloo solutions that continue our leadership trajectory and inspire others to follow in our path. This proposed regional official plan with a sustainability and climate change focus, along with minimal farmland loss and 15-minute complete communities, is the bold visionary plan we're going to need to thrive in the decades ahead. You have strong public support. Please do not delay or defer. Further delay is not in the best public interest. In fact, it could trigger the province to intervene in a manner we don't want. Let's grow by our choices and not others. This is our opportunity for our elected officials to plan for the future that we need that is in the best public interest. We need these solutions now for our housing and climate challenges. Our region's track record, legacy, and previous planning success speaks for itself. Please approve these regional official plan amendments with a strong unanimous approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Any questions of the delegation? Seeing none, the next delegation is Matthew Corey. Mr. Corey, there you are.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. And hopefully you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Oh, let me try that one more time. I apologize. Just sharing my presentation. Looks like it was not coming up the way it should. Let me try that one more time. I apologize. Can you see that now or no?
No, not yet, Matthew.
Oh, I'm very sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm having a little bit of problem here. Let me try one more thing. I did send it to the clerk. I don't know if potentially the clerk can throw it up. I apologize. I've been having a computer problem all day.
They're trying it.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of committee. I'm here before you again on behalf of Schlegel. You've heard from me before, and I'll keep my comments very brief. If we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The recommended, we're here before you just to discuss recommended settlement expansion in Southwest Kitchener with regards to Schlegel's lands and the surrounding area. We have had the opportunity now to do a much more thorough analysis of the region's work as well as the settlement expansions and the criteria. Having done that, we absolutely strongly believe that the lands in Southwest Kitchener that are not protected, protected countryside area are very suitable and very appropriate and can very much help the region and the city to meet its growth needs to 2051. Those lands can obviously be comprehensively planned in conjunction with the surrounding areas in Kitchener and the newly developing areas. They can be cost effectively and efficiently serviced. They're located directly adjacent to and would be effectively continuations of neighborhood development. And in one case, there is servicing pipes right into the land. And in another instance, the lands would result in the completion of a collector road in this area. And the most important points are that there's no specialty crop areas in the Schlegel lands or the surrounding areas, and the proposed expansions are not designated protected countryside area. Next slide, please. This is the two areas we're talking about that we'd ask for committee and council to consider for inclusion into the settlement area boundary. This is just showing this on first map 1, the regional structure map. And if we go to the next slide, please. This shows it on the second. The request is there. I fully expect and understand, having followed the process closely, that committee is likely to adopt the ROP amendment in its current form and send it off. That we've been able to really push through quickly and put in a lot of comments, and there's been a lot to digest. I listened closely to Mr. Regier and noticed comments that they did consider those, and I really thank staff for having looked at those and considered it. Unfortunately, I think there's still, with respect, some corrections that really need to be made to the land needs assessment, most notably the miscalculation potentially of the greenfield supply that we've noted. And so I was a little disappointed to hear that there was no amendment or adjustment to correct for that. However, not in any way, of course, suggesting any delay here. I think if committee is to adopt this today and it go to council next week, our only request then is that we can continue to work with staff through the ministerial approval process to work through that and see if we can find any corrections, and obviously have consideration, as we expect, that the need for land that will come out of doing those corrections is most notably accommodated here in Southwest Kitchener in the best way for community, and to achieve 15-minute neighborhoods and all the other laudable objectives of the region. So with that, Mr. Chair, I thank you. I just wanted to provide this input and also note that we have put in, as of this afternoon, an extensive submission with all of the background notes and thinking and details for staff's consideration as they move forward seeking approval with the minister. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and obviously I'm here to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Corey. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, the next delegation is Lucas Zhang. Mr. Zhang? There you are. Welcome.
Hey, hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi. I'm here to speak in front for my one of my friends, and it's also one of my clients. So as we have discussed in this council meeting, that there is tremendous needs for housing. Right now, we have, for example, as our experiences, we have submitted a zoning change for on Columbia Street, specifically it's 84 and 88, trying to rezone that two lots to a mid-density or high-density zoning. So it's been, we have started this process since 2015, and to today, we have no progress. So my client has spent over $200,000 and more to did all the planning justification report, urban design brief, all the concepts has been submitted to the city of Waterloo. But the feedback was we were only allowed to build 4 townhouses on this 130 foot wide and 200 feet deep lot. So I think this is a little bit on the other side of the need of more dense housing situation. So I'm also working for a let's put it this way, a student housing rental company. So what's right now, the students are paying close to $1,900 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment, and $2,400 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. So students is at a situation that is not afford to live around the university area. And make this more worse is that even students willing to pay, most of students still are not able to find a place to live right now. They have involved what we call is a bid war. So the student have to raise their rent to able to be able to secure a place to live. And because I'm working in this industry, what I also see is so these student housing company around the university area, what they start doing is they're releasing 2 or 3 units every day to let students know, and then is able to raise up the price. So this is very similar situation as what we see happen in the real estate market earlier this year. say January and February in around Kitchener, Waterloo area. So what I'm trying to speak here is we're trying to utilize the land, speed up, like approve, get approval for a mid-rise or high-rise zoning change. But it's 7 years since we have submitted our application, and we're allowed to build 4 townhouses on a major Columbia corridor. So I would hope that I can get like a direction of the public or the council meeting that where should we go about this? Like who should we work with?
1 minute.
Sorry.
1 minute. Just a minute warning. That's all. Go ahead.
Sorry. Just wants to know or get a general idea or direction about who should we talk to, or how can we push this project going forward instead of leaving the 2 or 4 piece of land without any use. In my personal idea, like it's a waste of resource on a major corridor of the central uptown Waterloo. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for everybody.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zhang. And maybe I would ask staff to get in touch with Mr. Zhang to deal with that particular issue. It sounds like a city matter, but maybe there is a regional implication as well. Any questions to the delegation? Okay, the next delegation is Luca Bucci and Alex Piccini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just me today, so I'll go ahead and kick things off.
Okay, so you have 5 minutes.
All good. Thank you. So thank you, council members, for your time today and to speak to you on this very important matter. My name is Alex Piccini. I'm the Manager of Government Relations with the Ontario Home Builders Association, the OHBA. Our association represents home builders across Ontario and is also speaking up for future residents who want to call Ontario and specifically Waterloo Region home, but will also need a place to live. Earlier this week, the OHBA and the Building Industry and Land Development Association released their top policy recommendations in a 5-point plan for consideration by the province in its new mandate. These priorities are based on the February 2022 recommendations of the Housing Affordability Task Force and forward-thinking initiatives that are intended to lower costs and increase housing supply for Ontarians. I want us to focus in on that 3rd recommendation that we have, which is to make new lands available to build new housing and support future growth, as home supply and costs are highly dependent on land availability. In this regard, it is essential that upper-tier municipalities provide sufficient land for all housing needs to meet market demand. Conformity with the minimum targets of the growth plan means that municipalities are not sprawling, they are accomplishing smart and compact growth. Moreover, it is important that each municipality conform with the growth plan to ensure that each and every one take their fair share of the growth coming to the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Failing to provide the right kinds of housing creates an undesirable result that residents strive to qualify for appropriate and attainable housing, which is the worst outcome from a planning and climate change perspective. Ultimately, if these issues persist, people and businesses will move elsewhere, move to other jurisdictions in Canada and North America to the great detriment of the Greater Golden Horseshoe, in particular with mobility afforded from remote working, which is likely to persist to some extent beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. It is not necessary to take an assumption of an overly high forecast for one type of housing to make the number, particularly given the current growth plan has flexibility in the policies to ensure that compact and complete communities are delivered along with a market-based supply of housing. A balanced approach with a focus on medium density housing is required to provide compact forms of grade-related housing, which is the most affordable to residents. Key requirements of the provincial land needs assessment methodology are that it requires A, a housing scenario that achieves more compact communities while delivering market-based supply of housing. B, residential need and supply must be determined by individual residential unit types, not simply density applied to land. And C, the market-based the market-based supply for housing can be modified only to the extent that is necessary to achieve the targets of the growth plan or an alternative target. OHBA is concerned that the provincial land needs assessment methodology is not being faithfully followed by the region of Waterloo in completing its work. 2 independent land needs assessment analyses have been completed by independent professionals and provided as input to the region. The work is consistent with the work of other technical experts. Both analyses conclude that approximately 950 hectares of community area land is required to meet the region's population growth needs, particularly through medium density housing with an intensification rate of 50% and exceeding the minimum density of the growth plan by achieving a density of 60 residents per and jobs per hectare. The region cannot afford to get this wrong. It is a counter to good planning, provincial policy, and affordable housing objectives to undersupply certain types of housing, in this case, grade-related housing. Which would occur in the scenario being recommended by regional staff. We urge the region to consider a medium density focused scenario as part of the work for the land needs assessment. Such a scenario can meet or exceed the targets and fully conform to the growth plan, including the minimum greenfield and intensification targets. It can primarily plan to house residents in the missing middle, realizing a significant move away from the historically high proportion of low density units, while also maintaining a shift to more apartments in the region. It will encourage growth in the region for new families and retirees in more affordable housing options, which they will prefer. It will support high density growth and intensification by directing the vast majority of population growth into existing settlement areas
One minute,
and
Mr. Piccini, 1
along
minute.
higher order transit routes, optimizing these areas for the type of transit available. It'll maintain more than 75% of the region for agricultural, rural, and natural use, which will achieve a balance of priorities, including the protection of agricultural and rural lands, while providing sufficient housing supply and supporting economic growth in the region. And finally, it'll accommodate a 50% population increase with only a 3% increase in settlement area through smart growth in neighborhoods with higher densities and a mix of residential housing types and other uses that meet market demand. The total area used for urban uses will only increase by 1% from 25 to 26% in the. Thank you very much for your time today. That concludes my presentation. I appreciate Council's opportunity to speak today. Thank you very much. I cede the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Piccini. I think we do have a question, Councillor Verbanovich.
Thank you very much, Chair Galloway, and thank you, Mr. Piccini, for coming in today. I do just want to follow up on your comment pertaining to the land needs assessment, and some of your concerns that you've addressed around whether or not the region has approached it correctly, the differences of opinion that sit around that very issue, which I think ultimately becomes the crux and of some of the debate that's still going on this issue. And it's too bad that your colleague, Mr. Bucci, isn't here with you right now, because I think he would be helpful on this issue in light of his previous role with the ministry. I don't know if you heard the presentations from staff earlier, but they indicated that the LNA is consistent with the direction from the ministry, and yet your presentation is suggesting that there may be some discrepancies there. Can you help us come to terms with that? From your knowledge, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to discuss it internally. From Mr. Bucci's experience, are we approaching it correctly, or in fact, is there a gap here?
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Ronovic. So certainly, as I mentioned, I know I kind of run through a number of different pieces quite fast. So perhaps it's best if I focus in on the point I noted on the 2 independent LNAs that had been done and provided as feedback to the region. And that's where really we focus in on the basis of perhaps some discrepancies on whether it's actually meeting the intent of the growth plan. The conclusion that there's approximately 950 hectares of community area land that is required to meet the region's population growth needs through that medium density housing, right, with the intensification rate of 50% and exceeding the minimum density of the growth plan by achieving a density of 60 residents and jobs per hectare. So that's, I think, the crux of the concern that you're identifying, and I would focus back to that.
So again, I mean, it comes back to, though, we're being told, and most of us on council are not planning experts, or certainly not land needs assessment experts. We're being told that this is meeting the expected format and approach from the province in terms of making these calculations. And these calculations really become the foundation of everything else that this important document is built upon. And so I'm just really trying to understand how we come to terms with, clearly what is the ministry's expectations on this, or the required model, and do we meet it or don't we meet it? And I don't know if you can help provide any additional insight here.
Well, I would note that, there are certain types of housing that are going to be in stark demand in years to come, right? This discussion and the conversations that are ongoing at council are very much not just about current residents, but about future residents. And where the previous noted reports that I mentioned have focused in on the challenges around typology and the right kinds of homes, the grade-related style of housing, is lacking in the current scenario being proposed by regional staff, and that's something I would recommend that the region focus back towards more medium density, ground-based, ground-oriented housing to meet and exceed the standard as set out in the growth plan, because ultimately people coming to the region are looking for that type of housing. And at the same time, there's also folks that live currently in the region who are looking to move up the housing ladder, right? To move from that one-bedroom condo into something more ground-oriented. And so making sure that type of housing as a proportion of the growth is actually addressed in the proposal by staff. And so I would throw back to that as a key focus on the staff report, and something that cannot be gotten wrong, given the nature and the implications of the ROP for the next number of years.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pacini. I'm going to exercise a little discretion here and move one delegation up at this point in time due to their own time constraints, and I would now ask Tova Davidson to delegate.
Hello, everyone. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can, Tova.
Thank you so much for accommodating my time constraints. I appreciate it more than I can tell you. I know I only have 3 minutes and I will be quick. For those who don't know me, I'm Tova Davidson. I'm the Executive Director of Sustainable Waterloo Region, and I am thrilled to be here today to delegate on this. I am one of the very honored and lucky stakeholders that got to come to some of those community consultation meetings with your incredible team that worked on this. They were so committed to this work. They were so open to hearing what this community had to say. And it wasn't just a bunch of us sustainability and environment folks. There were developers in the room, really great conversations. And they took away a lot of this feedback and created what I think is a bold and innovative future for this community. It aligns so beautifully with the Transform WR strategy and that vision of an equitable, prosperous, resilient, low carbon future. You're hearing from some of the development community that this is not quite what development needs, but I actually think it's quite a development positive regional plan. It's saying, how do we do things differently? And what is Waterloo Region better at than thinking how to do it better? And I would encourage you to think about that. The idea of 15-minute communities in our last conversation harkened me back to that idea of, would you be my neighbor? And this is about connected transit. And it's about having resources for people who can't necessarily get around a huge community to get to the resources they need. But more importantly, it's about people. Everyone's going to expect me to come here and say it's going to reduce our carbon footprint and all of those things. And yes, I think it will. And those are all really important. But the reason we fight for this environment is we're fighting for people. And to me, this is a people-centric regional official plan amendment. And I encourage you to look at it that way and to think about what this brings to our community. It brings prosperity. It brings a different way of thinking. It brings a new and bright future. It leaves an openness for us to get to where we need to go in a way that meets the needs of a variety of people. Yeah, I thank you. And then I'll just close with the idea of looking for that vision for the future, to be bold, to be innovative, to think different, because we want to build that better community for everyone. And while there's compromises in here, I think this is a plan that is a good, strong foundation for where we need to go. So thank you for the time today, and thank you for accommodating my crazy schedule.
Okay, thank you, Tova. Councillor Urbanovich.
Thank you very much. And thanks so much, Tova, for coming in today for the great work that I know you do, both as an organization and as a partner and advocate with so many others in the community around the issue of sustainability. And you know, you speak as others do around many things that are certainly music to my ears, whether it's you know, complete streets, complete neighborhoods, 15-minute communities, how all of that links together. One of the things, though, is I know you've been a great partner in terms of working with other partners in the community, and outside of the concerns that we've heard from particular developers, we've also heard from Best WR, which, as you know, represents our two chambers throughout the entire region, our own Economic Development Corporation, as well as Communitech and so on. And we've heard concerns around the approach around our ability to meet the growth targets and so on. And so, you know, as someone who works so closely with those groups in the work that you do and in what we're trying to do with Transform WR, you know, the latest correspondence from the chambers at least is, you know, indicating that at this point, they're suggesting, in fact, that this may require provincial assistance to get these issues resolved. And I'm just wondering sort of what you say to that and the role that they're playing in this as one of your partners on these important issues.
Sure. And I'm just going to clarify, when you say SWR, you don't mean me, Sustainable Waterloo Region. You mean the
No, Best WR.
Best WR. I thought you said S. I'm like, wait. Okay. Best. Yes. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. So what I would say to that is, you know, I think this is actually quite a business focused and economic prioritizing regional plan. The challenge that comes up is when they think about the way we've built the economy in the past. If we keep doing it the way we've always done it, we need more land for this kind of house and for big sprawling businesses and sprawling neighborhoods of single family homes. But I can tell you that all of the research that we've done and the things that we hear in the businesses we work with, and we are a business organization. Everyone thinks environment first, but we're a business organization. We know businesses operate differently now, and their future of how they see business operating is different. And so I would encourage you not looking at the way it's been in the past, but to look towards that economic prosperity. And the example I will give you is the clean economy sector map that I recently led in partnership with a lot of these groups that you're talking about. A lot of people thought we didn't have a big clean economy sector in Waterloo region. And then we did the outreach, and we had over 130 organizations reach out to say, I want to be part of that map. And the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation team believes that 100 is a viable map. We had 130, and I still get them all the time. People saying, oh, I think I should be at it. And those companies, that $3 trillion industry worldwide, doesn't want to go to a place that does the status quo, big sprawling single family homes. They want a place that's thinking differently, because sustainability means innovation. Yes, we need some of it. And from what Mr. Regier was saying, there certainly is still lots of that kind of single family homes and development lands for business. But we're also allowing for that innovative future vision. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Tova. The next delegation is Mr. Ryan Doherty.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Doherty. I apologize. My notes just disappeared from my screen. My name is Ryan Doherty, and I'm a land use planner with Bouse Fields. I'm here speaking on behalf of our client, Cook Lands Group. So I want to first thank you for providing me with the opportunity to be able to address you all this afternoon. And thank you to staff for pulling up my map that I'd like to show. So I'd briefly like to speak about an urban boundary expansion request that we filed as part of the ROP review. This request is numbered S72 on page 13 of Appendix B to this meeting staff report. And the property in question is addressed as 985 to 999 Bridge Street West and 730 King Street North in the township of Woolwich. As shown here in red, the request pertains to approximately 43 hectares of land straddling the border of the township of Woolwich and the city of Waterloo. And our request was to include the lands within the urban area boundary for employment uses. So we have been active participants in the urban area boundary expansion process since 2020 and have filed various correspondence with both regional and township staff with respect to these lands. As shown in the staff report, staff have currently recommended that the lands not be included in the urban area. However, despite the recommendation, we'd like to again bring forward our clients' lands for committee and council's consideration. So what we feel this map shows is that the subject lands are strategically located and are well situated for employment uses. Part of that reasoning is the overall size and visibility of the lands, which are suitable for a wide range of employment uses, including a major employer. And part of that is the immediate adjacency of the lands to the existing Conestoga Parkway interchange and Stockyards urban area to the west, and also the existing provincially significant employment zone to the immediate south, which is highlighted in the dark blue color. The lands within this employment area to the south are almost entirely built out. More locally, we also feel that the lands represent a logical expansion opportunity, given that they are clearly defined. What I mean by this is that the lands are bounded by adjacent roads to the south and west, the Conestoga Creek to the north, and a mineral extraction operation to the east. So for all of these reasons, it is our opinion that the lands would result in a logical expansion of the urban area boundary for employment uses. As the staff report notes, there is currently a need for approximately 456 hectares of new employment lands in the region to 2051. And we feel that the subject lands would help to address this demand in a discrete manner that is not at the expense of broader agricultural lands. So in our discussions, what we've heard so far is that the most significant concern with respect to our request was the potential crossing of the countryside line, which is shown here in that purple pink color. While we understand that there is important history and purpose associated with the countryside line, it is our opinion that the location of the line alone should not be the determinative factor in evaluating the subject lands, given the other planning and economic related goals that could be achieved through the land's inclusion. Instead, it is our view that the countryside line also be reconsidered as to whether it makes sense as a long-term boundary in this location, and that adjustments can and should be made where it makes logical sense to do so, which we feel is the case here. So in this respect, I'd like to bring the committee's attention to a staff recommended expansion of the urban area boundary in the town of Wellesley, which is, I believe, referenced on page 8 of attachment C of the staff report. So this recommended expansion includes the proposed adjustment to the countryside line for new community areas. I believe staff already spoke to this as well in their presentation. So in similar fashion, it's our opinion that a similar rationalization of the countryside line should be considered to accommodate the subject lands for employment uses. In doing so, the urban area could be rounded out to a more logical boundary.
1 minute, Mr. Doherty, 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you. And provide new employment lands in direct proximity to existing infrastructure, including existing highways. So with that, I just want to thank Regional Council and staff for your time and consideration, and would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Doherty. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Not a question, just a comment. We own land right across from that parcel, so I would declare a conflict on that if there was any further discussion.
Okay. All right, no further questions. The next delegation is Mr. Mark Reeser. Mark, there you are.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Mark.
So ladies and gentlemen, you know me. My name is Mark Reeser. I farm in Wilmot Township near New Dundee, and I'm representing today in my capacity as Vice President of the Waterloo Federation of Agriculture. I'd like to speak directly to staff and you, councillors. You, as staff and councillors, have a long list of responsibilities, but the singular most important job that you are responsible for is land use planning. Yes, budgets, programs, and staff are important. We need them. They are all part of what makes this community a livable place, but they come and they go, and they change and they disappear. The physical structures on the land that are the result of land use planning decisions last for generations. They result in permanent changes to the landscape. The reason that we include land use planning in our official plan should not be for our own benefit, but rather for our children, our grandchildren, and everyone who comes after us. If we want to preserve farmland and the natural environment, we have to intentionally plan to do that. Do we want our children to be able to walk or bike to the edge of the city, cross that countryside line, and enjoy the natural landscape with its wonderful variety of flora and fauna and associated benefits of clean air and clean water? Do we want to be reliant instead on other countries to provide our food for us, or do we want to produce enough food in this province to feed our own population? The amendment that you have before you today identifies the needs of the people here in Waterloo. Its visionary approach to planning protects farmland and the natural environment. It provides a wide range of options for housing in the context of livable, walkable, complete communities. We have a demonstrated track record of good planning that provides a choice of where to live, the opportunity to find meaningful employment in as wide a range of options as anywhere in Canada. There are those who implore us to plan in the same way as everyone else, to sprawl and pave and sprawl and pave. Please don't tell us how to plan. Rather, ask us how to do it right. Our template for growth has withstood the test of time. It works, and the amendment will allow us to continue and refine our vision for a community that is the envy of municipalities across Canada. Please don't entertain a deferral of our new plan. To do so would risk making it a Toronto plan instead of a Waterloo plan. This plan is ours. We own it. Please stand behind it and give it your unanimous support. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, Mark. Nice to see you again. I guess you know what I'm going to ask you, aren't you? I'm going to just talk North Dumfries. Now, cutting right through the whole of North Dumfries is prime agriculture, but it's all slated for aggregate. Now, let's take Wilmot. Wilmot and a lot of people there were fighting the coming on of a new aggregate pit, a farmer turning his land back into aggregate, or turning into aggregate. That farm was surrounded by 7 other aggregate licenses that were all farms. So I want people to understand that what you're protecting may end up not being farms at all. I think we have to understand that, and we have to understand that by the province, we have to do better to protect that countryside, because it doesn't mean much when it comes to aggregate. So thank you.
Okay.
Does that merit a response, Mr. Galloway?
If you wish, Mark, yeah.
I would just like to say to the mayor, we in agriculture and the Waterloo Federation in particular certainly sympathize with your predicament and ours in that there are not suitable protections for some agricultural land in places that are zoned for aggregate or which have aggregate as a resource. And we are doing everything within our power to help persuade the province that there is value in agricultural land. There are lots of places to get aggregate. Aggregate under prime agricultural land is not the place to use that resource.
Okay, thanks, Mark, and thanks, Councillor Foxton, for the regular reminder. Unfortunately, somewhat beyond our control, but we continue to lobby, as does the Federation. The last scheduled delegation is KLG. Okay. And Kay just lost power. Okay, so Kay is rebooting apparently, and we'll be back momentarily, but I was planning a break. And why don't we do the break now for the next 5 to 10 minutes? We'll come back and hear Kay and then proceed with the rest of the matter. People are back. So we will carry on just the one last delegation. I don't believe we have any other who have registered during the meeting, so this is likely the final delegation. KLG. Okay.
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me okay.
We can.
Okay, good. Sorry for the technical glitch. There's a reason I send my slides to clerks ahead of time. I hope they'll put them up for me. But I did want to start by thanking everyone for I'm not seeing my slides. Are you seeing them? Oh, here they come. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I wanted to thank staff and council for offering so many consultation opportunities, and especially the in-person one. I'd just forgotten how great it is to be able to have that back and forth with staff and to really delve deep into the questions like I did at the Wilmot Recreation Center. And I also want to thank planning staff for the tremendous amount of work you've done and to answer the concerns raised by developers, elected officials, and the general public. And thank you also for meeting with provincial staff and ensuring that your creative approach is supported by them. Next slide, please. And after that, the next slide. You've heard a lot today about needs, and you've heard a lot about what people want, but are these the same things that we need? So let's explore that idea. Next slide, please. It's really easy to understand why people want to build more homes like this. For decades, this is what we believe people want, these spacious homes on large lots in a beautiful country setting. And it's no wonder home builders want to build more of this grade or ground-related housing, I think Mr. Piccini called it. But is it something we need? And it's especially when we consider the financial, environmental, and human health costs. And is it even something we still want? Please go to the next slide. Can we afford to sacrifice farmland for rural suburbs? This report really hit me, pointing out the inflation that we're seeing in food, that most of it is related to transportation issues. So we need local farmland. Next slide, please. We need local farmland, or we're going to be more and more reliant on imported food, and our costs will only keep going up. Next slide. As David Suzuki says on the cover of what has become for me and my family a life-changing book, eating locally may be one of the most important ways we save ourselves and the planet. So I'm delighted to see that the proposed amendment minimizes the amount of Waterloo Region farmland that will be lost. Next slide. Increasingly, people are considering not just their own wants and desires, but the broader needs of society, of our planet. And what we want is changing, and according to this. So we now have a lot of people, as Tova mentioned, who want 15-minute complete communities where they won't ever need to own or use a car. And you've heard this over and over again in your consultations on the ROP. Next slide. We know we have to change. Infrastructure costs are much higher with urban sprawl. An OECD study said that it can triple the costs. And certainly with inflation pushing everything up, this has to be a concern for all of us. Next slide. And the Waterloo Region Climate Action Report made it clear we have to do better. Transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gases in Waterloo Region. And next slide. And worst news of all was the fact that it had increased from 2010 to 2015, even though we had reduced our overall emissions by 5.2%. Next slide. There's no doubt the climate crisis is worsening. Over half the US, as well as Canadian prairies, are gripped by drought. Wildfires are increasing in number, duration, and intensity. Flash floods, record-breaking floods are striking community after community.
One minute, Kay.
Okay, and people in cities who never once thought of owning an air conditioner are dying from the heat. But fortunately, next slide, you have pledged to do something about this back in 2019. So here's your chance to make good on that promise. The proposed amendment sets the framework for policies that give us a chance of keeping our world habitable. Next slide. And fortunately, you have before you a ROP which promises us a future, one which will do our part to keep our planet livable for us. It will give us a healthy environment, thriving farms and countryside, and greener, more resilient communities. Next slide. So thanks for being bold and visionary and giving us the plan we need. And please, next slide, vote yes. Don't delay, don't defer. We need these solutions now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Kay. Okay, I see no questions or comments. So that concludes the delegations. And at this point, I'd like to call on Regional Chair Redmond to read into the record a letter that was received recently.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. Really pleased to share this letter with the public and with Council. I received it. It is a letter from Chief Mark Hill, Six Nations of the Grand. He's head of the elected council. It's Dear Chair Redmond, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Region of Waterloo for the time and attention that has been given in consultation with Six Nations of the Grand River Consultation and Accommodation Process, known as CAP team, in regards to the Region of Waterloo official plan. We're very pleased that you have taken our values, worldview, and beliefs into consideration when drafting your plan. The Region of Waterloo is embracing the idea of shared stewardship of the lands that we have called home since time immemorial. This is so important in the face of rapidly changing climate. As you know, the protection of the natural environment is paramount in our concerns, and we are pleased that you have heard and understood our views. The Grand River is also of utmost importance as a source of our drinking water and needs protection to the best extent that is possible. As we are sure you would agree, and that you have we have stated repeatedly, the natural environment will do quite well without human intervention. As a matter of fact, the natural environment would thrive without human intervention. But we as humans cannot survive without the natural environment. For instance, if all the trees were destroyed, we would die. If the waters or the air were polluted, we would die. If pollinators had nothing to pollinate, we would die. We are all connected, and we need the natural environment to sustain us. That is the basis for a Thanksgiving address, or the words that come before all else, in which we give thanks for all aspects of the natural environment, and is also the basis of the value statement that we have shared with you. We are pleased to see that you have significantly limited the amount of land that the Region of Waterloo is in need of in order to meet the growth requirements as set out in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. We're also very pleased that there will still be places in Southern Ontario where our future generations will have the opportunity to live in a world that is not made of steel and concrete, where they will still have the ability to put their feet on the ground. This is possible due to the efforts of the planning team at the Region of Waterloo are making today. That very much aligns with our view of looking ahead 7 generations into the future and ensuring that what you are leaving them is something for which we can all take pride. We are very much in support of the approach to the planning that the Region of Waterloo has undertaken and look forward to the continued mutual supportive relationship. And again, this is signed by Chief Mark Hill. And because Chief Hill was unavailable today and we are probably not taking delegations at the next meeting, I had agreed to read this into the record. And I think this is a testament and reflects a very, very important fundamental consultation that I compliment staff for, and this has been a relationship that has been building over decades. And again, the First Nations wanted their support to be read into the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Redmond. So now what I would suggest we do is we get the motion on the floor and then go from there in terms of discussion and debate. So Councillor Jaworski, you were going to move it, I believe. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Foxton? All comments? Okay. Councillor Clark? Okay. All right. So we have the motion on the floor. Of course, we will take them separately as per the noted conflict. Councillor Foxton.
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair. When will we be asking questions of staff?
That's now.
Oh, okay. So separate of the debate and the questions. That'll be separate.
Yeah. Right now, I would
Okay.
like to have questions of staff, yes. Sorry,
Okay,
I should
thank
have
you.
clarified that, yeah.
Just a comment to staff and to make the rest of council aware. So back in 1998-99, the province said North Dumfries can't grow anywhere but in the Village of Ayr. And they said once the Village of Ayr is done, there's no more growth. And that last piece was the southwest corner. After that, you can't grow in Ayr at all. And we understood that, and we accepted that, and we created the Ayr Special Area, and this parcel of land was the last to come on. And that's what the original plan originally started with, was this southwest corner, and then and also the employment lands that were agreed with as well. And now that's changed, and very small amount. Now, first, let's talk about that. The Village of Ayr, everybody walks. You go for a 15-minute walk, it takes you probably 45 minutes to an hour because everybody stops and talks to you. But everybody walks. It is a walkable community. This last parcel of land still makes it less than 10 minutes to the core of the community. And it's a perfect fit. And we love it. We love kids bike, parents bike, you walk. We have one of the homes for the that the region sponsors for the significantly handicapped. And every day you see them wheelchairing the residents down the streets, walking with the wheelchairs to Tim Hortons or to the grocery store. We already are a walkable community. Including the Ballantine lands, I think, is essential because we've always understood that's where we end our growth, and that's where we'll have to sustain. And then infilling, and that we're already doing that. We're working quite well with that. The things we want to talk about, I've already mentioned the aggregate. The other thing is 80% of the traffic that goes through Ayr goes to the 401, and it's not from our residents. I would say our residents do about 20%. So we're not saving anything because we are a major contact to the 401 for a lot of communities in southwestern Ontario. So that's not going to protect us. So we're already a 15-minute community. One of the things I'm afraid of, and I spoke to Rod Begier and Regional Chair Karen Redmond about, I worry about a concrete jungle. I mean, a lot of people talked about you can drive and be out in the countryside, and you can, and we love it. You know, I mean, you can go on a power walk on a square area in North Dumfries, and 3/4 of it is countryside and ponds and little fisheries. That it's great, but I worry about the cities becoming concrete jungles with high rises and townhouses. Now, Rod Begier explained that there's 22 single-family homes to be developed in the region, and that's good, but we have to make sure that the green spaces, and he mentioned that today, and that's really important because I don't want us to just have it. I want the region to have it. I want a place where people want to live because it's beautiful, because you can breathe. And so that's another thing I had down there. Transit. Rod mentioned something about transit and how it's doesn't really work for low density areas, which he's basically talking the townships. Now, he's right. There isn't a good system for transit in the townships. I'm meeting with the Minister of Infrastructure this week to talk about a study to be done on how to better deal with transit in the rural communities, because the ones that live there really don't want to drive their cars to work. They want to probably take some type of transit into Cambridge or Fairview Mall and get on the island and go work that way. And also going to, a lot of our businesses are actually picking up staff and bringing them into Ayr to work because they've got no other way to get there. And that's becoming a large problem too. So we want to do a study to better handle transit. Apartment and condos, we're doing that. We've gotten several apartments and condos happening now. The problem being is, remember a while back I told you apartment building that wanted to go to condos, and there was an uproar in the community. And let me tell you why. Because people that live in Ayr brought their parents to live in those apartment buildings. And they're all unfixed income, and they're very concerned if they get bought out as condos. And Chair Redmond, you know what can happen if you live in a condo. And the region is holding us up on that. They're asking us not to protect the rentals. And so we're meeting with them tomorrow, but I find that shocking that it goes directly against a lot of the policies the region has. So hopefully we can work that out tomorrow. Probably another thing that'll raise my blood pressure And the only other thing I have is I like the idea of the book, The 100-Mile Eating Locally. I think I'm going to look that up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fox and Councillor Rabanovic.
Thank you very much, Chair Galloway. So I'll focus on questions now. I'll come back in later for comments. I guess the first question that I have is for Mr. Regier. Rod, earlier today, did you receive some response back from Councillor Davey, rather with respect to your response to him, I believe, from yesterday?
Yeah, through you, Chair Galloway, it's been a busy day, so I haven't put too much attention to it, but I have got it, and I've got it right up here now on my screen.
And I guess my question, or just in fairness, because he was referenced in your comments earlier today, and here to defend anything that was said. I think I do want to acknowledge that he shared with Regional Council. Thanks for the follow-up. I agree with the notion that a population with a younger average age requires fewer homes. The rationale would hold here if that figure was static, but it's not. Example, in 1980, the median age in Canada was 29. By 2000, it was 37. And then he goes on to say, by 2051, the target date for the ROP, our median will be 47, which is on the higher end of today's G7, unfortunately rendering the age argument moot. And note, those aren't my numbers, projections, but rather Stats Canada's. And so I just wanted to make sure that you saw that and that was in the public record. I also note, just briefly before the meeting, we heard from the Chamber of Commerce's with respect to the original letter from Best WR that I believe was received and sent to you, Mr. Chair, and there was a formal response, I believe. There was a request for a response by August 5th. They received it yesterday, haven't been able to review it all, and have asked to be able to delegate on August the 18th. And I'm just wondering, in light of that, and the fact that we weren't able to get them a response until such a late point in time, would we consider hearing from our two chambers of commerce on the 18th?
Yes, they can submit a written submission.
Right. I believe they were requesting to delegate, though.
I don't believe we're going to allow delegations. They're going to read their thing anyways, so they can submit that.
Okay. I mean, I will say that on something so important that it does concern me that we're not going to give people the opportunity to do that. I know some of this information, even for today's meeting, was sent out on a Sunday, which is pretty, out of the ordinary for municipal processes to be sending stuff out on a weekend, which isn't a business day. And so, that does, I just have to say that does cause me some concern. Mr. Regier, my next question is just, have we had an opportunity to review the proposed legislation from the province yesterday that impacts what we're dealing with today?
Well, we've had a brief look at it. It's been one day, and we'll be studying it in more detail as we get a bit of time to do that. And we'll bring forward a fulsome analysis to council when we have an opportunity to do that, probably in the September cycle of council.
But I'm more concerned in terms of how it may or may not impact our consideration of the ROP. Will staff have an opportunity to review it ahead of next Thursday so that we can consider that in council's decision-making process? We can take a look at it with that in mind and bring
preliminary view to council, I would say that the legislation is in draft form. We'll have an opportunity to comment in detail to it at the appropriate time, and at this point, we're working with the assumptions of the provincial policy framework that's been given to us by this current government, or the last government, which was so we feel like we're on strong footing here in terms of the direction that we've got from the province regarding the methodology that we used in this regional official plan amendment process.
So my last question to you, Mr. Regier, is, like many of the delegations, including community-focused groups and so on, I strongly also believe that a Made in Waterloo region solution is the ideal way to go. And we've heard that from others, including community partners. That it's the preferred way to go as well. But I've also heard from regional officials that from some regional officials that there's also expectation that this may end up going to the minister for a review. And in fact, the letter from the chambers, if you had a chance to review it late this afternoon, in fact says we need provincial assistance. And so I'm just wondering if, what any concerns from staff about that may be, to have, two groups, arguably, in terms of the two chambers. And I'm not clear whether that's just speaking for the chambers or for all of Best WR, sort of calling for that. Is that a concern to our staff team?
Yes, well, it is a concern that they're not satisfied with the analysis. I think they haven't provided us with any information that would fundamentally challenge the integrity of the land needs assessment that we've prepared, and so, as professionals, we have an obligation to bring forward what we think is our best analysis to support public policy in our community, and so I feel, excuse me, my lights are. I feel comfortable with that. I think that our team has done, and our consulting team has done, a solid piece of work. I don't think that we've seen anything. We've taken input from our stakeholders, from the industry, from the community, and so on. We value that input. We've made adjustments, as council has seen, to the outcomes, to the policy recommendations, to the numbers, when that has been warranted by the new information that we've received. And what we've brought forward to you is a solid analysis that we feel will stand up to careful scrutiny. I would also say, just in response to the letter, the email that came in this morning from Councillor Davey, that his estimate for the regional population age is 47. Our LNA is using a population age of 42 in 2051. So it remains a very young population right through the planning period relative to our peers. And we do actually contemplate this in our numbers. Our model fully takes into account the gradual aging process that our community will go through, and results in a decreasing persons per housing unit calculation right through the planning period. So we have fully accounted for the change in the demographic structure that is planned for and anticipated in our community.
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions. I'll key in for comments later. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Mine are mostly comments, but I can probably turn it into a question if you'd prefer. First of all, wanted to thank regional staff for the hard work on the ROP amendment, and particularly the collaborative approach that you used with the township related to the stockyards area. Staff were very complimentary on the process and the work that was done together. So thank you for that. The comment that I think I'll turn into a question is sort of falls in line with some of what Councillor Foxton said, and that is developing 15-minute communities in the rural areas. And, it's not always even that our communities aren't walkable, it's that we don't have the amenities in them to walk to. So that doesn't make it a walkable community. So I guess the question would be, and then Breslau, of course, would need transit to make that whole area walkable and also a core area. So my question would be, over the next 30 years, how will the region help to address that issue?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Shantz, for your question. Through you, Chair Galloway. We also really appreciated the collaborative approach of the township staff and all of the conversations that we've gone through over the last 2 years to this point. The next stage in this process, once the regional official plan is adopted and then approved by the minister, is to go through a detailed planning process. This is a very high-level document. The next stage is for the area municipalities, the Township of Woolwich, for example, to go through an amendment process to its own official plan, and then for new areas that are brought into the urban area, for new DGA elsewhere in the region, there's a need for a secondary planning process that needs to be informed by the policies that we're putting in place with this amendment. So there's a lot of work to do to shape the communities that we're building, and the work of the township is going to be essential to that process. We're really excited about the implications. We think that there's a lot of energy in this community to build vibrant, sustainable, thriving communities and walkable communities right across the region. And so the next stage in this process is for us to roll up our sleeves and get it done.
Okay, Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, just a quick question of Rod in following up on Mr. Thomason's presentation. As he mentioned, he gave a time frame, but I want to check with you that essentially the region will have to do this process again in a certain time frame that Mr. Thomason mentioned. But I just wanted to check with you, when will the region really, when will we need to work on this again? Like, we've already put in 2 years onto this one. When do we have to start all over?
I know. We just barely finished it in 2015 and 2017. We started all over, or 2018, we started all over again. So we're obliged to review the regional official plan every 5 years. So we will take a look at it. Sometimes we're not required, because there's no change in provincial policy. We're not required to look at the fundamental assumptions of the regional plan. But periodically, provincial policy changes, and under those circumstances, then we're required to do what's called a municipal comprehensive review. And so, for sure, council will be looking at an amendment of some sort to the regional official plan in 5 years, or start one and hopefully complete it 5 years, 6 years out. But then, if provincial policy changes, then we'll be doing a full comprehensive review again, and we'll also do a lot of monitoring of our assumptions. As we mentioned in our presentation, we'll be working with the area municipalities and the industry to monitor carefully the assumptions that this plan is based on. We know that what we've based it on are forecasts. We think they're good forecasts. They come to us from the province. We're responsible for them. But we're going to monitor our assumptions. is this playing out the way that we're forecasting? And if it's not, then we have an opportunity out, not in the not too distant future, to tweak the plan to make sure that we have the housing and employment land that we need in the region to support our economy and our community. So I think this, in the normal course of things, in the next 30 years, you could expect at least three full municipal comprehensive reviews and a periodic evaluation of the plan. And I would say continuous monitoring through that process.
Perfect. Many thanks, Rod.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see no further. Oh, Councillor Harris. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm assuming we're going to be heading on to the motion following.
Yes, yeah, if you want to start on the debate and the motion, yes.
Yeah, no, so I figured I'd get my comments in now, and I definitely want to thank my colleagues. This has been a very lengthy process. The stakeholder community that have provided much input over the last few months. No doubt staff have worked diligently on this, and for councillors that have read hundreds and hundreds of pages of reports, God bless you for that. I will say to you that we know one of the major issues facing, frankly, our country and province, but more especially here in our region, is frankly the housing affordability crisis. In fact, the most recent provincial election focused on this, and we know that there's a commitment by the province to build 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. That was alluded to again yesterday by the tabling of a new bill by the government. And of course, that ROP is a key function to ensuring there will be the available land to build those homes. I will say, though, that one of the fundamental unresolved disconnects that we have been hearing from land economists who do not share the views of our staff and our regional consultants is that a market-based approach to housing mix really hasn't been used. As I understand it, the demand analysis was not done on a unit type basis and instead blends the densities of unit types. And this, as I understand it, does not conform to the provincial methodology, which frankly requires the need or demand for housing structure type to be assessed separately. I know our staff and consultants are telling us that they have, observed a significant shift in demand toward medium and high density forms. I will say to you, as an occupant of a home in South Kitchener, I speak to my neighbors often. There's a reason why. We know through immigration, multi-generational families, we hope that families will get bigger. The need for diversity of housing stock is going to be critical. We also know that the construction of intensified areas in our downtown core don't provide the mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units. And I know that I read regularly in the newspaper, buildings that are before lower tier councils that speak to this fact. I would say to you that our community has or would challenge us as to whether or not the choice supply and pricing is in fact in place to allow families to buy what they're looking for in order to raise their families here in our community. Or are we simply not capturing the data of those who have voted with their feet to drive until they can afford the type of housing they seek? And those young families are no longer staying here in our community. A variety of housing is most realistically achieved in new, compact, urban, adjacent greenfield communities. It is this type of housing that provides opportunities for improved housing affordability, increased density, complete communities, and desirable housing mix and forms for residents. I know that Mayor Urbanovic just spoke of the Chamber of Commerce. Their organization and Best Waterloo Region have been telling us we cannot rest on our laurels in terms of competing for talent, attracting talent, and retaining talent. And I would like to thank Ian McLean for speaking up, frankly, on behalf of those job creators. This is a compelling concern. And I believe that drive until you can afford comes at a cost environmentally. As we all know, Grand River Transit does not reach folks in Tavistock, Stratford, or Drayton who commute longer distances to good jobs here in the region of Waterloo, and of course contribute more carbon to the ecosystem as a result. I would add, when do employers vote with their feet to shift to with lower cost housing to suit the needs of their workforces. I think of an example of Toyota and Woodstock. Another matter that troubles me is I am not sure we have been advancing an honest conversation as to where best fits are for achieving 15-minute communities. I look at the area of Waterloo region in which I was elected to represent, the urban municipality of Kitchener, and I see opportunities for immediate urban adjacent developments, which are truly 15-minute sustainable communities. And again, I appreciate the question from Councillor Shantz with regards to, the definition of a 15-minute community and how it actually is impacted or spelled out for our rural municipalities. I think it's worth all of our colleagues' time to read the submission that Woolwich has. You can see it in your agenda package, and the complexities that surround that definition, especially with active transportation opportunities at our doorstep, that being in Kitchener, of course, affordable sanitary and water infrastructure at our doorstep, and these much needed areas which are not, by the way, identified as protected countryside being overlooked in this recommendation before us. I heard the presentation speaking to a large parcel of residential land having just received draft plan approval here in our urban community of Kitchener that I know has been frankly in the planning process for at least 20 plus years. And so the need to inject that land into the pipeline now, knowing that there's a significant delay in that approval process, of course the government's tabled new legislations to speed that up, is of a concern, frankly. I would say to you, and I'll wrap up here shortly, Chair, I wanted to get this out, but if the region were actually to allocate the City of Kitchener its share based on population projections, it's my understanding that more than 350 hectares of allocation should be going to the urban municipality of Kitchener in order to help meet our provincial 2051 mandated growth forecast. And Kitchener has already 240 hectares of urban land, which is not designated as protected countryside. Of course, I've sat at the provincial level of decision making. I do take the region-wide view of our community. That said, as I look at the way in which Kitchener has been overlooked in terms of ability to meet a balanced, realistic, and environmentally responsible approach to meeting the needs of our growing community in 2051, I simply cannot vote in of what has been recommended to us today. I will be, as I mentioned to some of my colleagues earlier, voting against this amendment. And I would say to you, I trust the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing will likely dictate that we will be receiving this imbalanced ROP back into our lap for reconsideration in the future. I believe that that's likely now the best hope to get this right. I know that perhaps there'll be a recorded vote. I would assume that that's the case. And we'll see where this goes in the coming weeks and months. People want to live here in the region of Waterloo. I want my children who are young to be able to afford a home here in our community. I no doubt believe that Ingersoll and Woodstock and other communities are lovely, but I want them to be able to afford a home here. And I think that the actions that we've outlined today doesn't provide for that affordability down the road for future generations, including generations today, knowing how long it'll take to actually develop this important land. I just don't see how, breaching the countryside in Wellesley addresses some of those environmentally, sustainable issues that we speak of. That leapfrogging process is, in my opinion, happening here, where we've got better areas of land to, frankly, build those truly 15-minute communities. So I'll wrap it up. I appreciate the indulgence of my colleagues and look forward to the rest of the debate and discussion.
Chair Rebin.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. I have a couple questions and a couple of comments, if I may. Several of the delegations did have speculation around our land needs assessment and the relationship that we've had with the province. I'm wondering, Mr. Regier, if you can talk about two things. One is how our methodology was confirmed by the ministry, and also the conversations you had about delaying these decisions and the impact that potentially could have for us as a region for a made in Waterloo region solution to how we go forward with our planning.
Yeah, thank you for the questions through you, Chair Galloway. I'll ask Danielle DeFields and Brenna to respond to the question about all of the consultation we've had with the ministry. We've been in regular contact with them on sometimes on a weekly basis. I haven't been in all those meetings, so I'll let Brenna and Danielle respond to that. And with regard to the question of the implications, I guess for potential deferral, we've been working with them very closely. They understand where we are in the process. We've forwarded to them all of the information as it's been made available to council. They've indicated they're ready to accept it and to start the evaluation process right after we complete this. Should council approve the amendment next week, and then so the process will proceed as contemplated. Now, if we defer it, we run into a number of other challenges. One is that we'll need to wait till there's a new council in place to deal with this. The first order of business for the council will be the budget, and then so we'll get to the regional official plan amendment perhaps later in the winter, and then that will be a significant delay in the regional official plan process. All of the amendments to the local area municipal official plans will be held up through that period of time, and we will simply be waiting for direction during that process. So I think there are some significant implications. The province is ready to accept it when we deal with it next week. With that, I'll turn it over to Danielle and Brenna, who can speak to the consultation regarding our methodology.
Thank you, Rod, and through the chair, I can get us started and then I'll ask Brenna to supplement. There are regular meetings between regional as well as staff at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in the local office. And through those meetings, there's been a variety of different discussions over a very long period of time on the land needs assessment, variety of different policy topics and updates, the expansion areas, and more recently, the proposed updates through this updated amendment, which is before you. And Brenna, you can supplement that with any additional information.
I've been probably the key person who's been meeting with the province on a biweekly basis for the last year and a half. Have presented our land needs methodology early on. No concerns were raised. We've been working with them, as Danielle said, on a series of through our meetings, we update any concerns that we've heard and look for some feedback. So they haven't, as Danielle said, they haven't raised any concerns, and we will continue to meet with them. Hopefully post adoption as we move through the process.
So thank you for that. I think it's really important that people viewing this and the public as well as council is reminded of the fact that there has been a constant information loop about going back to the ministry, to their expectations. And that's not to say that reasonable people can agree to disagree. So I know there are people in the community that had different consultants do their land needs assessment, but they have not shared that with us. So it's not possible for us to sort of compare and contrast those two processes. I'm not a planner. I have been chair of a planning task force through AMO for the past year. And I don't begin to know all the nuances, but I know that planners are very professional people and they take their roles and their obligations very seriously. And I would make the observation that this is kind of a Goldilocks regional official plan. And there are no winners, there are no losers. The collaboration and the conferring that has gone on between all of the professional planners in all 7 area municipalities and regional staff have been second to none. And I think we've heard evidence from civil society today. We've heard some developers that may have issues because they would have seen a different result, but we've heard civil society say that this is something that they can get behind. And I thought it was really interesting that Tova Davidson talked about innovation. 2051 is a long way away, and there may be innovations and there may be changes, but it's not like this process will be locked and loaded. So I think everybody's put a little bit of water in their wine, and I think that this is a plan going forward that absolutely will meet the needs of this region. And again, to underscore that this wasn't to create winners and losers, which is why when you saw the graphs, you saw every area of the municipality and the area municipalities that did have employment growth and did have residential growth. And I thought it was really important. What I read into the record by Chief Hill was something that he asked to have read in, and I think we can't underestimate the significance of the fact that they are wholeheartedly supporting this regional official plan. So there probably will never be a perfect regional official plan, but I think the balance in this one is pretty close to where we need to be, and I'm fully supportive of it.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through the chair. So I'm going to make an assumption. So Rod, let's say that this passes, unanimously or not, it passes, and then developers or whatever take it to the tribunal. Do you have any idea how that would evolve? Like, I mean, I was here on 2014 when we were at the, it wasn't a tribunal then, whatever it was called, and it took till 2016, and a lot of money to go through that. So if we head in that direction, have you any idea, will it be a similar situation again, do you think? And I know it's all speculative. Or I liked that Danielle and Brianna talked about that they've been in contact. I think that's a real positive. But what do you think if it went to the tribunal?
I guess through you, Chair Galloway, I wouldn't want to speculate on how this might go out. I think it's how this would play out should the minister direct it to the tribunal. I do think if that's the situation, then we'll put our minds to it, and we'll brief council accordingly, so that you're fully apprised of the process and options when the time comes. I just simply wouldn't want to speculate on the process because the mechanisms have changed quite significantly since the last time we were through this. And you're absolutely right. There was that was a long, drawn out process and very expensive. But I think I simply wouldn't want to speculate at this stage in the process. I think we've put together a really solid plan. The analysis is excellent. There's strong community support for it. I believe that we've got something that will go forward successfully.
Thank you. And maybe the question was unfair, Rod, and I apologize.
Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. To my colleagues, have you ever been to an all-you-can-eat buffet? And you go there and you say, this is wonderful. I'll have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. They take your plate, you come back, get a new plate, fill up again. Then you go for the dessert, and then you get a dessert, and then you grab another dessert. And at the end of the day, you know what you're filled with? Regret. And I think that's really the story here is that the regional official plan is the control. It's the all-you-should-eat buffet. And I think that's really what we have here today. And I think, as we all know, a lot of work has gone into this. KLG mentioned the meetings and the accolades for that. If everybody was coming up here today and saying they're concerned, if all the delegates were, I think that would be something to particularly listen to. But what we're hearing is a lot of good stuff. We've invested a couple of years in this. So many meetings, hundreds of pages of detail. I think somebody mentioned about, next term of council. And quite honestly, next term of council is going to have a lot of new people on, a lot of fresh faces, a lot of fresh ideas. They're going to have to deal with the budget. climate change, post-pandemic recovery, homelessness. They're going to have a lot of stuff to look at. Here we've got 2 years under our belt of a lot of expertise, many of us with many years, if not decades of expertise, to look at this today. And I think, you know, when I look at what is Waterloo Region's competitive advantage, our differentiator, our urban-rural fabric. And it's the regional official plan that actually protects the urban-rural fabric that we enjoy here, that tight relationship between township, town, city, urban environment. And, you know, this is really a great document, what we have here today. And I think that's really why I'm excited for what we have here. Certainly Waterloo is probably the hallmark in Ontario for intensification and what can be done without the use of land. And I'm not saying that should happen everywhere to the extent it has happened to Waterloo, but I can tell you in Waterloo it's worked. And KLG, who's been on right at the ground zero of intensification and has been giving us information on that and feedback on that for decade. And to hear her come today to say have here is right and is you know, meets the needs of intensification and newcomers and some expansion. I think that's probably the highest praise we can have. So with that, I'm just you know, really proud of the team, and I think I know we all are proud of the team and all the work that's been done here to get us to today. So thank you.
Councillor Urbanovic.
Thank you very much, Chair Galloway, and thanks for the opportunity to make some comments. And you know, as we sit around the horseshoe virtually, for many of us, you know, particularly for the seven of us that, in addition to being a councillor at the region, have responsibility as heads of councils for our municipalities, we have an obligation to balance our big picture view and responsibility while we sit around the regional horseshoe, while also through a process speak strongly around the issues and concerns that our municipalities raise. As we embarked on this project, I will say there's been a significant amount of work that has been done by staff, and I want to acknowledge that in getting this work to this point. I will say, though, as I have at various points in time, that I found it a little disappointing that we were dealing with this not only as late as we were, but also in the rushed manner that we were. And, you know, that has resulted in, you know, quite frankly, groups still responding, you know, minutes before this meeting has happened today, things getting sent out on weekends. It's not the way that we normally like to do business. And so that part of it for me was disappointing. I do want to thank everyone in the community who has been engaged in this in this process. There's obviously been engagement from a vast number of community members who have engaged in the meetings, in correspondence, in our online platform, and so on. And that certainly speaks in a positive way to our community and the passion that citizens have for our community and the way it will develop going forward. And I want to thank everyone for that. As I look at this document, I think the one thing that all of us have in common, regardless of, you know, what we think is great about it, or maybe where any of the holes maybe still are, is that we want a made in Waterloo region solution. And that's certainly something that I'm hoping for. But it's something that I am concerned that, quite frankly, may be at risk. And I think we've heard that from some of our colleagues, and we've heard it from members of the community. And I guess only time will tell that. there are many positives in this plan without a question, and we need to reference that. The notion of a 15-minute neighborhood, complete streets, complete neighborhoods is certainly something that I've long spoken of and advocated for. Commitments to sustainability, a focus on intensification, something that builds on the investments that we've made in stage 1 of the ION and what's proposed in terms of stage 2, in terms of the ION running from Kitchener down to Cambridge. I think all of these things are positives and the kinds of things we need to do as part of each of our individual communities and our broader region's commitments towards a more sustainable future and one that recognizes the changes that need to happen as we work our way through a climate emergency. On the negative end of things, I am concerned that we don't have a consensus around the LNA. And I'm concerned about that because that fundamentally is the foundation upon which this whole document is built. And we know that, and we heard as recently as today, those concerns continue to be on the table from a variety of groups. And, not just those who have are a vested interest, but in fact from other groups, including the 4 groups that are part of Best WR. And for me, that's a concern because the conversations I have with employers, one of the biggest issues that they're dealing with today, particularly in this new world where people can almost locate anywhere for their job, is making sure that we're building communities that, are great communities to live in, but are also affordable. And I am somewhat worried that, based on what many of them are hearing, that we may not have met the mark in terms of this document. I certainly am hopeful that we will. The last point that I'll make, and it'll be interesting to see, is I know next Monday, Smart Prosperity will be releasing their report. I think many of you know economist Mike Moffat and the organization Smart Prosperity. And it will be a report on the 1.5 million homes that's being talked about provincially. And it'll really focus on 2 things. One, is that the right number? And number 2, if it is, how will those homes spread out across the province? And so I think that, may give us some additional interesting insight between today and next Monday. But all in all, I think we have a document that's probably gotten us as far as it can, it seems. It would have been ideal, as I think we always try to do, is find a solution that addresses all concerns on the table. It seems that that's not possible, and at the end of the day, it will be the minister that makes a decision one way or the other. As I said, my hope certainly has been for a made in Waterloo region solution. And I guess only time will tell us if that ends up being the case or not. Thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
I promise this will be the last time.
Could that be recorded, please?
I just wanted to explain to people why I'm going to vote against this. Because bringing in the Southwest lands was all your goals, your 5-minute community, 10-minute communities, the neighborhoods and everything else. It fit perfect with the plan, but that got changed. And so you took apart the southwest corner and you put way out in right field, way out, another development for North Dumfries, which we did not want. So I'm going to vote for the 15-minute community type plan that you originally went with. And therefore, since it's not happening with North Dumfries, I talked to my council exclusively last night, and they said, Sue, you have to vote against it then, because it's against everything that we initially intended. We followed the rules of the province. We followed the rules of the 15-minute community, and this didn't carry through. So I just wanted to explain why North Dumfries will be voting no. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yes, I will be voting in favor of this because we worked with our staff. We listened to our staff. They're happy with what it is. We're not totally pleased with the process. You know, the idea of having to vote on this the day before we start limping towards the end of the term. But the fact is that our staff have advised our council that they're not 100% happy, but they're pleased with where we got to. And you all already had a couple of my council members that did speak and expressed appreciation and being in favor of this. So I will be, as representing my council and my staff and my people, I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor McGarry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I did want to also offer a lot of my thanks, not just to region staff, but also to the City of Cambridge staff that worked very closely to sort of get things right that I think the City of Cambridge wanted to see in the plan, and a lot of negotiation, hard work at the table. And I am certainly aware that regional staff have done so with probably all of our area municipalities, and that's no small feat. I know that, you know, with urban and rural different concerns, and every municipality with its own sort of concerns and issues, I think we have landed in a place where we've addressed most of them in the best way possible. So I did want to actually acknowledge that all staff working on this has been extraordinarily, really, to get it to this stage. But I also wanted to acknowledge the comments that Mr. Regier and others have made, that the region staff has worked with MMAH staff closely, so that I'm probably less concerned than some in the community or even around this horseshoe. I'm less concerned that the province wouldn't accept it, because this is not coming out of left field. This is a plan that's been worked on, and, you know, there's been check-ins along the way to ensure that we're on the right track as a municipality in order to create that made in Waterloo solution. But it doesn't sound to me that we're outside the boundaries or outside the lines of what the province is expecting from us. So I'm just very grateful for this. I do believe that the letter from the Indigenous communities shows an emerging relationship that's strengthening. This is certainly a goal of our region, a value that's held dear by the 630,000 residents that we serve, to continue to forge ahead with a much stronger and better relationship with the Indigenous communities. And I think that to Chair Redmond's comments, I think this letter she read into the record today certainly shows that. I think that in these times where we're looking at a better relationship, the community can see that those discussions that we've been entering into have really strengthened. So pleased about that. I also acknowledge that there's varied responses from some in the community. We've heard that, some very much in favor, some very much not in favor of the plan and the amendment that's going forward. And I think we've seen that certainly in our written communication and some of the other engagement pieces. I do want to thank the public as well, because I think overall the engagement's up. The number of hits on the website and all of the other engagement pieces have really shown that there's tremendous response from our community. And now it's really up to us here to balance what we're hearing and to try and get it as right as we can to continue to plan for the future in 2051. I'm going to support this plan. I think that there's room for growth. There is certainly an acknowledgement that we are planning in a different time. You know, the last regional official plan or a couple of times ago weren't necessarily facing some of the things that we see in our communities now and some of the worsening climate change issues that we see in our community. So I think that this has been a tremendous exercise in order to try and balance all of the concerns and the issues that we see, not just here in the region, but certainly across the province and indeed the globe. I think that trying to plan with a crystal ball into 2051 is difficult at best. And I think we've had a meeting of the minds and the best information that we could probably have to make some of the decisions. I know for my municipality here in Cambridge, straddling the 401 location is very important. But this is a municipality that's looking forward to seeing higher order transit such as LRT and GO train link between Cambridge and Guelph so that we can connect with the GO train system. I think that planning for that in the future, along with the expansion of the airport, really does allow us to see a community that looks after itself. The last thing I'm just going to say was I met with somebody today who was in one of the subdivisions that was planned some time ago in the city of Cambridge, and they didn't have a focus on the 15-minute communities. And what she said was that when they run out of milk or, you know, they need a cup of sugar from the local store, they have to drive completely out of their community and a long distance away comparatively, because at this time it wasn't planned with that 15-minute community in mind. And it means that they have to take far more car trips than just walking to the corner store. I think our focus on the 15-minute communities, that smart city approach, when you can live in an area that provides a lot of the professional services and services that people are looking for, you know, the ones doctor, dentist, pharmacy, you know, grocery store, convenience store, gas station, that does help us to provide for the future and to ensure that we can meet our climate change goals, as well as a denser population that will have places to gather and to meet up with neighbors. I'm very supportive of the plan. I will be voting in favor of it. And thank you for allowing me to make the comments. Thanks.
Chair Redmond.
Chair Galloway, I assume we're pending taking the vote. I just asked for it to be a recorded vote.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody else that wishes to discuss it before I make my comments, which would be the concluding comments then? First of all, I do want to particularly thank a whole bunch of people, certainly the staff who have put in a tremendous amount of time, and in some circumstances have had to put up with some very difficult circumstances, difficult individuals, which was really unfortunate. But they have stood the test of those challenges and have come forward with what I believe is a very acceptable plan. I want to thank all the various stakeholders in the community and in some cases beyond, from the environmental groups to regular citizens to the development community for their input. And in some of our institutional organizations as well. I've been through a few official plans, and I'm not sure any of them were easy. This one was maybe a little more difficult because the province put on some specifications that really did make it a little more difficult. Certainly the 2051 horizon was a factor that created some complications vis-a-vis other official plan reviews. But I think that in my experience, the success of an official plan review is that there isn't necessarily unanimity, that there is some disagreement. I'd be a little more concerned if everybody was holding hands and singing Kumbaya as we work towards concluding this work. By the nature of an official plan, there are competing interests. And those competing interests have been heard. They have put forward in their arguments. Staff have given due consideration to those arguments. And I think on balance, we have a very good report. It certainly is very good in matching up to our strategic plan. Where we have climate change as one of our key components of our strategic plan, economic development, equity. These are all big factors in our strategic plan, and this official plan is particularly strong in all those regards. I take some consolation that if there are assumptions that change over time, or maybe assumptions in the calculations that were incorrect on this particular occasion, or are proven to be incorrect, that there are opportunities down the road to correct the course. I understand why some individuals want to get certain things done as early as possible, but I do believe that the process does allow for course corrections along the way. I'm very pleased that one of our signature planning principles, the countryside line, has stood the test and has been maintained. It's been confirmed in areas where it had not previously been confirmed, but it has not been, and it's been adjusted where trade-offs were appropriate, and I'm very pleased with the fact that our regional growth management strategy, which goes back quite a number of years and is a planning document that is held in high regard in the province, has stood that particular test. I did want to say, too, that I have given a lot of thought to the notion that supply leads to affordability. And I just don't get it. We have so much supply, even without any new DGA, and yet adding more DGA would all of a sudden make housing more affordable. And I know that would be over a longer period of time. But we aren't going to skip the DGA that has already been designated and start developing, leapfrogging down to other areas. So I'm sure in the fullness of time that more DGA will be added and will be needed potentially, but not at this particular time. I also want to say that I don't particularly operate well under threats that have been levied about what might happen beyond today or beyond next Wednesday. We all know that people complain about a process, and the process is not perfect, when you don't like the outcome. And so that I understand and I accept. But I think on balance, this is a good plan. And I think it will be challenged. I don't know if we've had an official plan review that hasn't been challenged because of the interests that are involved and the high stakes that are involved in some of these decisions. And we'll leave it up to the authorities beyond us to adjudicate that if in fact it gets to those levels. So what I'd like to do now is call the question. A recorded vote has been asked for, and we have 5 recommendations. The first of those will be taken separately to deal with the conflict noted. So I'm going to deal with that one second. So the motion that we are now going to vote on is 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I would ask the clerk to do okay, the staff are going to put them up. So we're going to start with motion 2. And ABCD is 2, 3, 4, 5 on your document. This is essentially the main motion. The motion being taken separately just deals with the Ottawa Street amendment.
Regional Chair Redmond.
In favor.
Councillor Urbanovic.
Affirmative.
Councillor Jaworski.
In favor.
Councillor Clark.
In favor.
Councillor Jowett.
In favor.
Councillor Erb.
In favor.
Councillor Nowak.
In favor.
Councillor McGarry.
In favor.
Councillor Armstrong.
In favor.
Councillor Harris.
Opposed.
Councillor Shantz.
In favor.
Councillor Strickland.
In favor.
Councillor Foxton.
Opposed?
And Councillor Galloway.
In favor. That's carried. And now we'll vote on the Ottawa Street matter, which a conflict has been declared on. And Chair Redmond, do you want that? Okay, that'll be a recorded vote as well.
Regional Chair Redmond.
In favor.
And Councillor Urbanovic declared the conflict. Councillor Jaworski.
In favor.
Councillor Clark.
In favor.
Councillor Jowett.
In favor.
Councillor Erb.
In favor.
Councillor Nowak.
In favor.
Councillor McGarry.
In favor.
Councillor Armstrong.
In favor.
Councillor Harris.
Opposed.
Councillor Shantz.
In favor.
Councillor Strickland.
In favor.
Councillor Foxton.
In favor.
And Councillor Galloway.
In favor. And that is also carried. All right, so that concludes the business of the day. I would note that we have a special council meeting on August the 18th to formally deal with this particular matter. And I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Harris, Councillor Armstrong, please use your voting icons to express your desire not to end this meeting. And that's carried. Okay, thank you, everybody.